show today. Fantastic show today. Bobby, how are you?
It's the best show of the week.
Tuesday is when Bobby's stable. He's like at home.
I'm at home. Look at this nice backdrop.
Yeah, they're in Chicago. And we have a guest today. So Coach Darren Gurney is here. He's a friend of mine from New York. Darren, how are you?
Good morning, Dan and Bobby. Nice to meet you.
Nice.
Happy to be with you guys today.
Yeah, so let me give you a little bit of background on Coach Kearney. He's going to fill in the rest because he's been all over the place, both as a teacher, coach, player. So were you from the Midwest? You went to Washington University, but is that where you grew up, or you grew up in New York?
I grew up in New Rochelle, so I'm a New Yorker through and through. I did 4 years out there, and then I came right back to the East Coast.
Just snapped right back. This isn't for me. Get out of here, corn. I need people honking their horns at me and bagels and great pizza.
No, you nailed it. I mean,
yeah. What did you like about the Midwest? What did you not like about it?
I thought the people were extremely nice. I went back for a reunion / baseball alumni game, and immediately, the minute I got off the airplane, it reminded me of how nice people are in the Midwest. Not that New Yorkers aren't necessarily nice, but it's so fast paced. No one has time to stop and just give you the cordial niceties in a day. So the Midwest is a very different vibe in that sense.
That's fair. So Coach Gurney is currently a coach at Lehman College in New York. He's also a high school teacher at New Rochelle High School. He runs a very successful baseball camp called Rising Star Baseball Camp. You guys have had a lot of big leaguers roll through that camp. I'm reading through your list, and I remember, I know I competed against Tom Kohler in college. There's a lot of big names there. So how long have you been doing that camp?
22 years, and it's been a real thrill. Yeah, we've been really successful in grooming a lot of NCAA players, and 6 guys have gone on to play pro ball. And right now we got a guy who's with the Dodgers. He made their 60-man pool, and a week ago today, he struck out Albert Pujols and Shohei Ohtani, and even jammed Mike Trout with a nasty running 4-seamer. So, yeah, we're real proud of our graduates.
That's awesome. And then Darren and I, we coached together in the Dominican Republic. Was that 2 years ago or 3 years ago now? Time's moving.
Yeah, that was 2018. So that was 2 years ago. Almost this week.
Yeah. So let's start there. So obviously the Dominican, that was my first experience there. Very eye-opening. How would you compare the way young players are brought up? And we're going to get to economics, and we have a lot of stuff we're going to cover today if you're just tuning in on YouTube or on Twitter. So we have a pretty wide-ranging show. Darren's an economics teacher and a really good one at that. So we're going to talk a lot about baseball and the way it's changed in that regard. But how would you compare the way Dominican players are brought up compared to United States players?
Dominican players have to open up eyes at a very early age, meaning they don't have college baseball till age 21 to hopefully get drafted or signed. They have to be signed by age 16 in most cases. So imagine an American kid that has to get signed or drafted by his sophomore, junior year of high school. So they're going to show off their arms. They're going to swing really hard, and they're not going to look to draw a walk. They're not going to look to just throw the ball over to first base. They're going to let it fly. And I think what we saw, Dan, is there was a catcher who was 15 years old on the Dominican team that had a legit 1.85 pop time.
Throwing aspirin tablets down the second base. I mean,
it was just freaky. And, we put the gun on him. We got the 3 times I got his pop time. Like, is that really 1.86 out of a 15-year-old? So,
in a game. Yeah.
Yeah. So their tools are just off the charts, but that's why we have so many Dominican players in the MLB. And if you look at it per capita, meaning the population of that country and how many guys actually make it from that part of the world, it's just incredible.
Yeah. Bobby, what do you think if you had to get all of your kids in your academy where they had to be signed by a major league organization by 16, what would you do differently?
Nothing legal. There's no way.
A trough full of steroid water?
There's no way. Every year we do
it's funny to put it in perspective that way, though. Isn't it crazy to think of it that way?
Well, there's you can project, right? Like you can look at a kid and be like, oh, maybe in 3-4 years, like this kid's really going to fill out. Like we could give him a shot. But there's no 16-year-olds rolling through that are like 88 miles an hour, 92 miles an hour. If they are, they're like the greatest player I've ever seen at that age.
Yeah, they're rare.
We do a tryout every year. Latin American baseball conference. I don't know. It's some Jim Parquet runs it out of. It's a Team USA essentially. Yeah, everybody wears USA jerseys. They go to one tournament in Dominican Republic, and he does a tryout with our organization every year. Some kids usually make it, but he gives a speech to all the parents in the beginning, and he goes, "Look," he goes, according to I don't know however they grade this, he like. Kids that grow up in a Dominican are physically 2 years ahead of kids that grow up in the United States. For whatever reason, like they're physically 2 years more mature. He's like, so if you're 12 years old, you're going down there, these kids are going to look like the 14, 15-year-olds here. He goes, if we're 16 years old, he's like, these kids are going to look like they're 20. And I don't know how that works or what the science is behind that, but it's definitely true. I mean, you see some of the videos, other than maybe faking an actual birth certificate, these kids, if they're the true age, are way more physically developed than I would say most of the kids I see around high school.
Well, do you think
baseball.
that's just selection? Darren, what do you think? Is that just the fact that if you're not that physical and strong, you just get cut and smell you earlier? Or what do you think?
I think it's the rice and beans they start eating at age 2. And you and I were fortunate to get a lot of rice and beans and that amazing chicken. But
best food. I love their food. I mean, I wish I could eat their food all the time. It's amazing.
Yeah, so I do think some of that might be genetic makeup, but I don't know if you remember, Dan, it was our second game. We were playing a night game, and this guy from the Cleveland Indians came over to me. I remember vividly. I'm in the third base box, and he says, hey, I got a 16-year-old over here. He wasn't even playing in the game. He said, we're looking, to sign him. Can you let him face your pitcher? And I said, I can't let him face this pitcher. I just don't feel safe because he was so developed. And that's when you took the mound and blew the kid away and crushed his dreams with like 92 mile an hour fastball and a filthy slider that he was. So that was fun for me to watch you dominate. But getting back to your question, it was really amazing to see a 16-year-old left-handed stick that was literally twice the size of our players, even though he was only 1 year older technically than our oldest kid.
But is that just because you don't see the skinny, scrawny, not as strong 16-year-olds because they're at home because they can't play at that level? I mean, all those teams fielded very competitive teams. And that's my point. It's not like every Dominican kid is just 2 years bigger. That doesn't make sense. They're still humans, right? So is it just the fact that it's just so much more competitive and they just basically weed kids out way faster, way earlier, and only the strong are still there?
Yeah, there's a real social Darwinism to it, not to get too historic.
That's what I kind of feel like it is, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And in general, it's kind of an all or nothing vibe there, meaning the kid who graduates from Vanderbilt or University of Texas in our country, he's going to be able to get a job, especially, graduating from a school like Texas or Vanderbilt. And the minute they don't get signed by age 16, they're going to be doing some menial labor, living a very impoverished lifestyle in all likelihood. Whereas in our country, it's not that way. So I think it's exactly that pyramid of that kid we saw. He was at the top of the Dominican pyramid if the Indians were really looking to sign him. So we're not seeing those skinny, little nimble guys.
Yeah. And the story, to elaborate on what Darren just mentioned. So we're playing this team, and it was supposed to, so we were like a 13 to 15 U team in the DR, and we were supposed to play teams that were comparable in age and size. I think that was like the agreement. But with most of these games, we showed up and there were just like 40 guys at the field. When I say guys, like kids, whatever. And they're like all ages and ranges. And sometimes they're just batting whoever. Like guys just get a stick and bat off us. And our team wasn't super strong. Our pitchers were throwing like some were like 70 miles per hour. And that kid actually got one to bat against us, and he had an absolute seed in the outfield. And after that, we were like, this looks like a sort of dangerous mismatch. So the next time he came up, you guys kind of asked, and I like volunteered, but I hadn't thrown a baseball hard. I hadn't like thrown a max effort throw in a long time. I was like a year and a half retired at that point. and I got out there just to pitch against him so you could get like legit competition. And I threw like the first 17 pitches were all balls, like head high. I had like no ability to locate it. And then when I finally got him in the zone, I just like punched him out and ended his career. It was sad. I
ended his career.
It was bad.
It doesn't sound that
I don't know.
sad.
I don't know that, but my curveball was pretty filthy that day.
I'll tell you what, it
Looked like
was
a
good
slider.
for our players. It was good for our players to see someone take them out. And I remember referencing on the bus ride back to the hotel, your laser focus out there, your demeanor, your posture. And I think it was a good thing for them to see early in the week.
Well, and those situations are interesting because as an old player, you still turn it on. And like the way I warmed up was there was really no bullpen. It was just a rocky, flat dirt sidelines, right? There was like hardly any grass. And just like get the ball and just like throw it as hard as you can, repeat your mechanics, try to throw your stuff, and then go out there. And the mound was pretty rough with a huge hole. But the big thing that, like you learn over time is that there just aren't any excuses, and my excuse for literally throwing a million pitches head high and like not finding the strike zone was that I hadn't thrown a ball in 18 months. But, you go out there and it's still all the same. You're just like, all right, this is what I have. This is the situation. This is the mound. These are the conditions. You go out there and just try to compete. And I think that's what good players end up finding is just the ability to turn it on and compete. I've been watching a little bit of The Last Dance recently. I'm late to the party, but I grew up watching Michael Jordan. And so it's reminding me of a lot of stuff that I knew as a kid, that I saw from him as a kid. But it's cool to hear him talk about how hyper competitive he was and focused he was, because it really was special watching him play. And I appreciate it even a little bit more now hearing from that whole team. The competitiveness is such an important thing. I mean, and it's weird to think like he was like maybe the most competitive person in the entire NBA, which is like the best athletes in the world. And he's like the most competitive. It's weird. You know what I mean?
And so much more than like the next guy.
Yeah.
Like it's not
that
like
doesn't make sense, right?
Like he wants to be on the bus first. And everyone else is like, guys, come on.
It really is weird when you see outliers like that. So I've only been to, I think, one NBA game in person. It was a 76ers Oklahoma City Thunder game maybe like 10 years ago. And I just remember seeing Kevin Durant. He was pretty young in his career, like not super well known, but I just was watching him and I didn't really care about basketball. I was like, that dude is more athletic than everyone on the field, on the court. Like he sticks out amongst NBA players.
Yeah.
And Michael Jordan was that back in his day. I'm not saying Kevin Durant and Michael Jordan are comparable. I think they kind of are. They're in the same realm, maybe not. I'm not going to
be in the same gym.
But there's Kevin Durant's super athletic to the point where he stuck out amongst the world's best athletes. So that's my only real point there. But anyway, so back to the Dominican. It's a crazy experience. So Bobby, you said you've got so some of your guys, did they go on that trip with Jim Parquet?
Yeah, so they go and they're there for a week. It's essentially an international tournament. So a team from Mexico will come, like Cuba will bring a team, Venezuela, the Netherlands, and the USA. They'll bring a team. The jerseys don't look necessarily like the real USA jerseys. They just say like a black letter USA on it, but you're still representing the United States. And the kids seem to love it. I mean, the 16U team 2 years ago won it. We had a kid on the team. He played a ton. And he said it was, unlike they, mob the field when they win the game. So it was unbelievable. And you're probably at that age not getting the best Dominican players on the field. You're going to get the kids that got passed over that aren't in the academies already, but you're still getting good baseball. And some of the younger guys that go, the dads just say how big and how strong some of these arms are that they're facing. Like the 12-year-old, we had a 12U kid go last year, and he was just blown away by the velocity, the size of the 12-year-old kids, and not just from the Dominican. I mean, the other countries as well. He said the U.S. He's like, we were probably the smallest team coming from the U.S., and you have teams, Mexico, Venezuela. I mean, some warm weather, probably baseball-heavy countries, and they're all funneling into baseball. All the best athletes are just funneling into the sport. Maybe not Mexico because of soccer, but all the other countries are baseball heavy. Cuba, Venezuela. I mean, those are baseball countries.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this in the past, but if there was like a handful of teams for New York, or only a handful of teams for Illinois or Chicago, those teams would be big. You know, like if there was one regional team for New York for 14U, just like one, those kids they'd be monsters, right? I mean, because they'd be, like you said, they'd be selected from all the best. It'd just be the most physical, ridiculous team. But there's so many spread out.
Well, then
So that would be a true travel team, Dan. And by the way, you know, because I have an economics perspective on everything, one thing I think your audience should know about is the baseball academies in the Dominican are so powerful. When a kid gets signed, when a kid gets signed, they basically turn over 50% of their signing bonus to the academy, which would never states. For instance, I work with a kid named Edwin Peralta. He's a single A player with the White Sox. And Edwin got 1.2 million drafted out of the Dominican, and he had to give 600,000 to the academy. That would never happen in America. So it's kind of a sad plight for them as well.
Is that how he felt about it? That it was, I mean, what were his thoughts about it? Did you talk to him about it?
I did. His English isn't very good. So whenever we train together, there's an interpreter there. And we haven't done a lot of talking about it, but his father, who I do speak to, whose English is a lot better, is a little frustrated because, you know, that's a lot of money for them, 600,000. But when they come to the States, they have to really husband that money and make sure they don't blow through it. So in terms of his training, whether it's going to a gym, a baseball facility, they really have to watch it. And I think losing half that signing bonus, because as we know, and we'll talk about this, minor leaguers don't make any money. That's kind of their nest egg as a family, including his siblings and extended family. That 600,000 is really going to be used for the next bunch of decades for the whole family.
Right. I mean, do you feel like that's wrong the way they do it that way? Because it feels kind of like venture capital in a sense where they're investing a lot of time and resources. They're like feeding and clothing these kids for the most part, right? Driving them around. Like these kids have a chance because of these academies in large part. And I certainly don't know all the ins and outs of them, but most of those kids are not going to get a signing bonus at all. And these academies have spent a lot of resources and their own money and time on all of them, hoping that they get a couple kids like him who can then basically pay everyone's bills, right? I mean, is that wrong for them to take such a big cut when that's sort of the system?
Yeah, I think the metaphor of a venture capitalist firm is a great one. Hey, we'll throw all these kids against the wall, and hopefully out of the 300 we're going to train.
One of them hits IPO. Yeah, like we're good.
Yeah, one of them's Vlad Guerrero or Pedro Martinez. Absolutely. So you bring up a good point, and whether it's a 50-50 split or a 75-25 split, I don't know what the fair amount is. Yeah. But 1.2 million, or in this case, 600,000 goes a long way in the Dominican. It goes a real long way. So I don't know if 50-50 is exactly fair. I mean, $600,000 could fund an academy down there for probably 40 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know the right figure.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know that much about it. I know there's probably all sorts of positives and negatives, pros and cons, and yeah, I don't know. Bobby, you should run your academy that way. Let kids come for free. Take a cut.
If I had the money,
there would be litigation.
There would definitely be litigation. If I had the money, I would do a lot more for free. If money was no object, I would teach probably a lot more baseball to a broader group of kids, like a more diverse group of kids in all parts of the city. I mean, Chicago's loaded with baseball. There's just not, like, I wish I had money like that, like just throwaway money. It's hard. And then to the kind of how you said, you're like hoping one of these kids hits down in Dominican. Well, the like cost of living down there is so inexpensive. Like you could probably run that academy for pennies on the dollar. Whereas
exactly.
Like I'm like, even my facility in Chicago, it's like scraping to make ends meet through, you know, some of these baseball facilities because the square footage is so large, and you got to have a lot of indoor space with the weather. I mean, I'm sure if you did something like that, and maybe in like the South where you could do a lot more outside, you could save a little bit of money. We lost Darren.
Darren, you still with us, or just maybe mute or you can't mute a video, but there you
I'm
are.
here. I'm
Okay.
here.
Yeah, it's so you. I don't know. This is probably the wrong way to. So, have you guys seen the new Blade Runner?
No, you love Blade Runner.
Have neither of you guys have seen it? Darren, you haven't seen the new Blade Runner?
No.
Well, he lands. So he's looking for his like birth parent. I think is that what it was. That's the plot line. So he lands on this. He lands on this planet where it's like a trash planet, and he finds this guy who runs like an orphanage. And in this orphanage, there's like a massive room of kids, and they're just picking apart electronics for like the precious metals inside of them. Bobby, you could do that, where they do like 5 hours picking apart old iPhones for the gold, and then that money funds the rest of their day. It'd be like the IMG Academy, but terrible child labor. Have you thought of this?
It's not off the table. If that's what you're saying.
I don't know why that came to mind, but it'd be funny if they're not funny. That's not a good scenario. Obviously, I'm joking. It would be interesting if there was some way you could teach kids like vocational skills that actually brought the academy money that could then be used for their own benefit. I don't know what that looks like, what that is, but like, what if they were doing like day trading and you're teaching about financial times? They're just day trading in the morning. Hey guys, you did great. You brought in 1.2 mil this morning. Really, really hitting it hard. Keep it up. All right, let's go to the baseball field for 5 hours. Like everybody wins. You have all the money you need to get them all to the big leagues, Bobby's Day Trading Academy.
We got to teach them some life skills.
Team NASDAQ. Yeah.
Look, you guys, this stock market takes one more day. You guys are done playing baseball.
Exactly. How could you bet on JP Morgan Chase? You know their CEO is unstable. Come on.
Have you learned nothing at this school?
So, Darren, let's shift into economics a little bit. So, this is your background. Give us the state of baseball, and then we'll kind of backtrack from there. Is baseball? What do you got? What's up with baseball?
So I would say 1995 is when I really became entrenched in coaching baseball. So I have the business of baseball, of economics from 95, which we know has changed so much. When you look at, well, let's start with the 1970s and the birth of the free agent. And then you have the strong players union, which is a stronger union than any other sport. And you've got these players getting gigantic salaries that are guaranteed, unlike the NFL. Right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Unless you're the Peyton Manning or the Tom Brady, every salary in MLB is guaranteed. And now you've got the merchandising and the TV revenue from those contracts. And that has filtered into youth baseball. And when you look at showcases and training facilities like Bobby's, and you've got the summer travel circuit, and you've got the technology and the equipment these kids have. So there's the business of baseball. And then the way I look at it, and I'm a trained history economist kind of guy, I go back to Adam Smith in the 1770s writing The Wealth of Nations. And those are like the classic traditional models of economics, which compare and have a lot of the tenets of baseball, where you're laissez-faire, no government interference. Similar in baseball, there was no MLB interference, which is obviously very different now, where the MLB is doing things like the designated hitter being mandated, or instant replay being mandated, or you have 20 seconds to release a pitch, which is probably going to be mandated, or we're going to do extra innings where we start a runner on second base, where we have a limited amount of conferences, obviously to speed up the game, because it comes back to economics and profits with all of those initiatives. And then we have other economists that come along, like John Maynard Keynes, who says, no, the government should interfere to rescue things. And certainly we've had a lot of that in the MLB. And then there's economists like Karl Marx, who in 1848 wrote this Communist Manifesto, where he said, we have the haves versus the have-nots. And if we look at professional baseball, I think you would agree there's a lot of haves, whether it be the Bryce Harpers or the Garrett Coles of the world, versus, as a minor leaguer, the average salary, I think, is something like $8,000 to $12,000, or even the MLB minimum right now is $563,000, which sounds like a lot of money. But unless you got a good signing bonus and you have an injury, you're out of the game. there's definitely a real discrepancy between those elite players making millions and millions. I believe the average salary in the MLB is something like 4.5 million, but there's all those minor leaguers and those, bottom tier guys that never see $1 million in their life from playing the game. And
yeah,
then,
that average, how deceptive do you think that average is?
it's very deceptive because you look at the elite 3 or 4 guys on each team, and they might have a contract that's worth, 80 to 250 million dollars over the course of the contract. And then you've got the AAA guy that's kind of bouncing back and forth between the MLB and AAA. And I think I saw the average AAA salary for that veteran, that journeyman, is something like $83,000.
Yeah, once they make it to the 40 or one of the 25-man roster at all, and when they go back down, their salary changes for forever. Yeah, because it's like a minimum of like 83, and then it scales up from there. You could be making a pretty significant amount of money. You go from making $2,000 a month to 15 grand a month or more. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other economist that really, I think, parallels economics and baseball well, or puts them side by side, is Joseph Schumpeter, who came up with this concept of creative destruction. And the best way to maybe make that example come to life is, remember when Blockbuster Video was the company and then Netflix came along and just drove them out of business. And I think if we look at Major League Baseball, you see a lot of creative destruction. The concept of bunting, the concept of choke up with 2 strikes and put the ball in play, the concept of pitchers throwing down in the zone. A lot of that has really been overturned recently with the notion of strikeouts, right? I don't mind striking out with an 0-2 count, 1-2 count. I'm still going to swing hard. I mean, I was watching Cody Bellinger swing the other night. He was not getting cheated 0-2. And so there are changes. And we talked a little bit about the survival of the fittest down in Dominican. I think that even exists in America, where if you're going to stay in the league, you got to drive in runs, you got to have a strong OPS. So striking out's not a big deal. Pitchers, they got to strike guys out. They got to hit 95 on the gun, et cetera. So it's a little bit of this all or nothing mentality. And I think Schumpeter in economics came up with this concept that does have through lines to today's modern baseball.
Yeah, it's funny that you talk, because I was just reading something about how 5 years after retirement, like 60% of NBA players have either severe financial distress or broke. And that's not uncommon with all these major sports, apparently, just because guys spend most of their salary during the season. And then when the season's over or the off season hits, they're still spending the same amount of cash. The cash burn rate's the same. And they don't have any income in the off season. And then lots of guys will only earn a couple $100,000. Like I know Bobby and I had a bunch of teammates like that who played a couple years in the big leagues and crossed paths with us in the Atlantic League. Mm-hmm. In a couple years in the big leagues, you make, your $450,000 salary at the time. And then, maybe you're up for the whole season, maybe you're not. So maybe you get $200,000 for that year, and then taxes. And then, you pay your fees and you live in a nice place and all this other stuff. And then suddenly, like, you don't have that much money left. And then 3 years later, you're bounced out, and it's like, okay, I have like $100,000 maybe left. And all right, real world, like, here we go. So,
well, nobody really, I mean, I don't know. I have never been in the big leagues, but the cost of being in the big leagues is significant as a player. Like, everything, you pay for everything, and you pay through the nose for everything. I mean, there's guys that, some of the friends I have that have made it to the big leagues, it's not an inexpensive lifestyle. It's not like a minor league lifestyle where you go to Chipotle before the game and like that's like a treat. That's something you're spending $10 and that's your money. Like the dues are unwritten $50 a day. You're tipping everybody. You can never allowed to carry your bags, whether you get to the hotel, to the field, everybody's getting tipped. You go out with the guys, like it's not it's not your local tavern.
There's definitely keeping up with the Joneses too, I'm sure.
Yeah, and there's it's an expensive lifestyle. You're living in a major city. You're probably on a short-term lease that's going to be, you're not sharing a one-bedroom apartment with 4 guys. like lifestyle is expensive, and then obviously you make it, so you're probably going to treat yourself a little bit, I would think. So the money's
Extra
just
Lulu
going.
pants. Yeah.
Yeah, you get a second, but you get everywhere you go, you travel in suits. Like you're gonna have to buy suits if you don't have it. Clothes are different, so it's an expensive lifestyle. I mean, you got to, especially for someone who's on the minimum. I mean, you're probably spending a lot more money than you've ever been used to spending just to keep up with being at the level you're at.
Yeah, and the other piece to that, guys, is these players acquire assets, whether it be cars, homes, jewelry, and then when they do file Chapter 11 bankruptcy, they have to liquidate those assets, and they get them for pennies on the dollar. So I got to dump my car or my mansion because I'm broke. I'm not going to get even 50 cents on the dollar for those items.
Yeah.
So that adds to their, personal bankruptcy.
Yeah, it's rough. You get that Lambo for 160 G's. You're only going to sell for, the bank's only going to get 48 for it at the auction. Dang.
Exactly.
It's rough. Well, let's talk about the free agency stuff, because we were talking off camera and I don't remember the specifics, but for those of you out there who are listening, the book Ball 4 by Jim Bouton, and Jim Bouton passed away, I think 2 years ago, but that's one of my favorite books. It's a really amazing read. There's still so much of what he said. He's just talking. So if you don't know about Ball 4, probably if you're 40 years old or older, you do. But Ball 4 was Jim Bouton, who was a major leaguer. He was chronicling his season as a Seattle Pilot, which was they actually became the Milwaukee Brewers, not the Seattle Mariners. But he was chronicling his season as a knuckleballer, converting into a knuckleballer after he had like a pretty outstanding first couple years as a New York Yankee. Like he won a World Series game and all this other stuff. And then he hurt his arm, and then he was trying to reinvent himself for the Pilots. And he basically was offered to write this like sort of tell-all book. So he was keeping a little journal throughout the entire season. And the book is like written like that, these hilarious anecdotes. But he was also, he just like gave no Fs. And when they were trying to basically force him to sign salary, like sign his next contract, he's like, no, I'm not signing that. And then they're like, don't tell. Okay, all right, we'll give you more money, Jim, but don't tell anyone. He's like, screw that. I'm telling everyone how much you gave me. Like he was very disruptive to the system. And again, I listened to it, I think a year ago, so I don't remember the exact specifics, but he was very involved with advocating for players, for free agency, for like getting that train moving. Again, I wish I did a little more research before we started chatting about this, but take us through free agency and the evolution of that. Cause it's kind of crazy these days. Like players get paid so much, but I mean, take us through it, Darren.
Yeah. So early 1970s is really where we see the advent of the free agent. And some of the early contracts were Catfish Hunter, Reggie Jackson. And those players, and you look back to those Oakland A's teams of the early 70s that were the best teams in baseball, and they lost a lot of their players to free agency. Reggie Jackson being a marquee name. And that's where teams started making the decision, hey, if we can sign a Reggie Jackson type of player, not only does he give us a chance to win, which Reggie helped the Yankees win a championship in 1977, 1978, but we're going to sell his jersey. He's going to put people in the stands. We're going to get a great TV contract. So it's not just winning and losing. And you see that across all sports now. You know, in our area, the New York Jets signed an aging Brett Favre to a 1-year deal. It was a very lucrative contract for Favre. But did the Jets really think he was going to bring them an NFL Super Bowl title? No, I don't think so. But they sold a lot of number 4 jerseys. And that right there was going to make it profitable. And I see it with my Knicks teams that are always losing in New York. Why are they signing all of these aging veterans that are not going to lead to even a playoff run? Well, they're going to make this. And the Garden sells out, guys. They sell out every single year, even though the team has a below 500 record almost every year in the last decade. So the free agent thing for teams is sometimes about profitability more so than winning and losing. And if you look at the MLB premier free agent signings, most of them don't lead to winning, right? These guys get hurt. Their performance starts to lag as they get into their mid and later 30s. There's been very few of those contracts, especially if we look at pitchers, that worked out. I mean, yeah, the A-Rod 10-year, $250 million contract, I think you could argue that was worthwhile for the organization. But so few of them actually pan out that way. So, I mean, look at Bryce Harper. I mean, it's early in that contract, but towards the end of that contract, do you think that's going to be a good return on investment for the Phillies?
No shot.
Highly doubtful, So I think it's interesting to look at. And you look at the teams that win the World Series, guys, it's not the teams that have a lot of those big free agent signings. It's the teams that are young and lean. They put the ball in play. They run well. They play great defense. They don't swing and miss much. The free agent signings, especially for offensive players, there are a lot of swing and miss players, those big free agent signings. So I don't think it equates to world championships, but it does equate to nice revenues for the organization.
Well, let me ask both of you a question, and this is going to tie in. I have a couple of things that tie into The Last Dance. Well, number one of the things that made me laugh out loud, like I literally laughed out loud, was when they're talking about Jordan's shoe contract, when his agent was saying, yeah, our hope after they inked Jordan was that they would sell $3 million worth of shoes within 4 years. And then he says, we sold 126 million in the first year. Like I just laughed out loud, which is just insane. But so there's two main people that stick out. And this is my question to both of you. So Salvador Perez signed a pretty low yearly contract. I don't remember what it was. It's something like 6 years and like $15 million, right? A couple years ago.
Yeah.
Scottie Pippen fell prey to sort of the same thing. And he talked about it. He said that he signed like 7 years, 18 million or something. And he became very bitter about it at the end because he became one of the premier players in the NBA and realized that his market value was maybe, 10 million a year at that point. Are teams under any obligation to renegotiate such a contract when like Salvador Perez signed that? And I remember reading about it. Like, he's like, look, I can't guarantee that I'll be healthy. This gives my family economic security. And Pippen said the exact same thing, but yet still soured on it. So do teams have any obligation to renegotiate stuff like that? I'll throw it to you, Bobby, first, and then we'll go to Darren since he's smarter.
That's
let's not get carried away.
I would say absolutely not. They have no obligation to renegotiate it. I think it just goes back to like you're worth what someone's willing to pay you. If it's Scottie Pippen's situation sucks because $18 million when he signed the contract was pretty good. But even in that example you're talking about, Jerry Krause told him not to take it. He's like, look, if you want more money, like you can't take this deal. And he said, no, I'm going to take it.
That's true. That's true.
You see what happens with the White Sox a lot. I feel like the White Sox are the best team as far as locking up their really young players, probably like a year early. So they overpay a year early and they underpay the next 7 years. They did it with Chris Sale. They do it with Jose Quintana, Louis Robert on the team now, Yohan Moncada. Like, these guys are making maybe $50 million contracts over the course of 6, 7, 8 years. That's nothing in baseball. Like, those are really, especially if they pan out. Like, you blow $50 million on a 2-year contract for a guy that might never play for you if he blows out his arm or something like that. In which case he's not giving that money back anyways. So I don't think that the organization from a business standpoint is under any obligation. They might in good faith extend you and give you, tack on a couple of years and some heavy salary. But I don't think they're under obligation, because there's plenty of scenarios where you can go back and this guy signed for $130 million and he got one decent year out of him. Like Albert Pujols' contract right now is absolutely absurd. Like he'd arguably be released and out of baseball if he wasn't making $30 million a year.
Ryan Howard, Chris Davis. I mean, there's a
right, but
laundry list of them.
There's so many examples of guys that have totally underperformed, and they're not. I mean, I wouldn't give the money back. You'd be crazy to give the money back. So I don't think you're under any obligation. It's nobody forced you to sign any contract. I wouldn't. Okay. I don't think so.
Okay, Darren, what's your thoughts on this?
So in the New York area, there's a classic signing of a guy named Bobby Bonilla, who you guys remember. And they're still paying him $1 million a year all these years later. They deferred the money down the road so they could use it in the present. So, like you said, there's countless examples. Bobby's response was a traditional Adam Smith capitalist answer. Hey, supply and demand, what the market will bear. It's interesting, Salvador Perez and Scottie Pippen, I'm not going to say they're blue-collar players, but they are guys who aren't as flashy, but they are essential for winning, right? Salvador Perez's defense is probably the best defensive catcher when they sign that contract, and you and I know it leads to winning baseball and helped them win a championship in 2015 with the Royals. Scottie Pippen wasn't the big billing guy because of Michael Jordan and other guys who were more flashy. But when you look at Pippen's defense and his length as a player and his unselfishness, he created so many of those winning championship teams. So back to the contract, no, that's the only exception to them renegotiating would be if the public outcry was so intense that the organization felt like, wow, we better kind of renegotiate this because the fans and the media are really coming down on us. And we saw that recently in New York with Jacob deGrom, where the Mets, I would say begrudgingly, gave him a new contract with additional money because he's the best pitcher in baseball, arguably, and he wasn't making the deserved money. And we saw with Matt Harvey, by the way, guys, Matt Harvey never made big money, even though he was the most dominant pitcher. The Dark Night, a Friday night game at Citi Field with Matt Harvey pitching, was the biggest spectacle in all baseball.
Yeah.
And if you look at his career earnings, and he's basically out of baseball, I think the Royals just signed him to a minor league contract. If you look at his career earnings, Matt Harvey never made big money, yet his stuff played as good as any pitcher in the game for probably 3 years.
Which I like that story. I like the Matt Harvey being sad story because I think he was a huge jerk. I mean, he was just like very smelling his own farts. So I'm on board with that. Like Matt Harvey really loved Matt Harvey. It was clear. So
fact.
Yeah, I'm on board with him. You know, life came at him kind of hard.
And I think that's why the public outcry for him wasn't what it was for Jacob deGrom. You know, Jacob deGrom puts his head down.
Seems like a great dude, professional, just goes out there and pitches and
Yeah, whereas Harvey was showing up late to practices. And
he wanted everyone to know that he was a superhero. Yeah, he very much slipped into that persona.
He was dating supermodels and out partying, and there's not going to be as much empathy for a guy like that who doesn't get that renegotiated deal. So I think it's a great question, and it ties in with traditional economic theory with supply and demand and let the market pay what it will bear, as Bobby mentioned.
Well, does a business have an obligation to pay people what they're worth or what they will accept?
Most would say what they will accept. However, as I mentioned, when the public outcry and you start getting negative PR on it, and you do have the notion of conspicuous consumption, which is an interesting economics concept, where in this case, people are paid because they are chic or they are fashionable. So giving that contract to Pujols, who was already going to be a Hall of Famer, made sense to the Angels. They're going to be able to put his number up for the history of the franchise on their back wall and retire his jersey because he's someone that carries a lot of cachet. So they overpaid in a sense to be able to have that player.
And I think Dustin Pedroia was a similar example. I think his name's Tom Tippett. So he used to work for the Red Sox as like a front office, and he would basically do these models to try to determine what a player was worth. He was one of the front office guys key on like contract negotiations. He gave a really interesting talk at Sabre Seminar, I think 2 years ago. And he was talking about watching players' trends. Like, all right, here's the 5 years before free agency. And then he like blacks it out. He says, all right, so what did this player do after free agency? How well could we predict based on what came before, what will come after? And it's very, very difficult, as you know. Like humans in general aren't good at predicting the future from past events. But he used Dustin Pedroia as an example, and he's like, look, yeah, we could maybe say like we should pay less for Dustin Pedroia or we should do this. But he said there's other human factors such as what does this say to younger players when we sort of like stiff him because maybe we think he's going to decline? He's been such a leader for our team in lots of other ways. You know, does Dustin Pedroia bring value as a human, like helping other players along, even if he's not as productive in the dugout? Does he that leadership role, like that David Ross role, does that provide an intangible value beyond just the X's and O's on the field, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And so he eventually said, like, so in his example, we paid what we thought Dustin Pedroia was worth, in the sense that we probably overpaid compared to maybe other teams, because we saw these other things that he did for us as an organization, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it also begs the question about psychology. Do players, when they ink that 10-year deal or 7-year deal, do they lose that motivation? And that's why a lot of teams have gone to the 1-year model. Josh Donaldson, I believe, was signed to a 1-year deal. Nelson Cruz has been signed to a bunch of 1-year deals. And in both of their cases, they actually produced really effectively. Whereas if you had given Nelson Cruz an 8-year contract before all those 1-year deals with those various teams, would he have gotten complacent? And, you know, I'm looking in New York at Yoenis Cespedes. The guy has amazing seasons typically in his contract year, but for the 2 or 3 years leading up to that contract year, his production and his injury rate is not where you want it to be as an organization.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Bobby?
I mean, the 1-year model's tough, right? Because if someone like Nelson Cruz, like somebody has the money to spend, we'll give him 2 years at $60 million instead of 1 year at $30 million. And then you lose him for a guy that maybe wanted to stay with you. Like, who's going to turn down guaranteed money in that aspect? And it's part of the Pujols signing with the Angels, right? Like, he was Mr. Cardinal. I mean, Albert Pujols was the face of the Cardinals, the longevity, winning. I mean, they were really, really good. And then he just jumped ship to the Angels because they threw buckets of money at him that the Cardinals just said, this isn't going to be worth our investment. So I don't dislike the 1-year model personally. I don't know if guys ever recoup the amount of money they could have made in a long-term contract. Like Nelson Cruz probably should have signed a contract that's every bit as comparable as Chris Davis or some of these other guys. So I don't know if he's ever going to get that money, but he's definitely outperformed Chris Davis year to year. And
well,
over the
who hasn't? I mean,
correct.
You know, I think, give any of us a bat, we'll outperform. Yeah, right. That's not exactly true, but
it's the 1-year model makes sense for the organizations, and if players are handcuffed, I mean, the players, they're only going to make that money in Major League Baseball. It's not like Adam Jones just went to Japan, the twilight of his career. Obviously, like, he's had a productive big league career, he's made his money, but I don't think Japan is a realistic alternative financially for any of these guys. So you're kind of stuck at what the big league teams are going to pay you. And if they decide to pay you a long-term deal, like, you're a lucky player. You're Bryce Harper. But if you're Nelson Cruz, where they pigeonhole you and they're like, look, you're a 1-year guy, like, at any point you're going to break down, you don't play a position, you're kind of screwed. So that it's
tough for
it's a monopoly
too.
Yeah, MLB is a monopoly essentially. They don't have competition. You can't go to the independent leagues and make anywhere near the amount of money and get more years, or they don't have an alternative.
So Darren, where do you fall on the Bobby Bonilla deal? Is that a good deal for Bobby or a good deal for the Mets? Who came out on top?
Well, Bobby came on top just because his production didn't end up equaling the amount of his contract. But it made sense at the time for the Mets to defer the money so that they could sign other guys at the time. So they were, in a sense, short-sighted. Hey, we want to free up the money now so we can have it for our operating expenses. Now, it ended up being a windfall for Bobby Bonilla, although with inflation.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Yeah, you beat me to
it.
I don't know that much about economics, but you beat me to the one thing I knew. He's making less money every year. Yeah.
Yeah. However, we haven't had horrible inflation in our country. You know, it's been pretty much 2% or less on average. So thanks to our Federal Reserve and other factors, $1 million 20 years ago isn't what it is now, but it hasn't been eroded that badly by inflation, to be fair. And, you know, back to the short-term, long-term paradigm of contracts, if I'm a Major League Baseball franchise, I would like to overpay for 2 or 3 years rather than giving the guy the 7 to 10 year deal. So I'll pay a guy $20 million a year for 3 years readily, rather than give him a 10-year deal for 15 a year, just because of body breakdowns and what I believe is motivation levels for a lot of guys decrease once they get that crazy money.
Yeah, it really is a weird thing. You'd hope that, like, just as an athlete, you wouldn't stop competing as hard because you've got security, but you just have to know that there's just going to be this level of, all right, well, I've got a wife and 2 kids now, so I'm going to take it a little easier in the off season. Like your family dynamic changes over time. Your body starts to break down over time.
Yeah.
Maybe you're like, you know what, I'll take it a little easier this off season. Like, I don't have to make the team. I remember the first year the only year I didn't have to make a team. It just fundamentally felt different in a way that I didn't like. Honestly, I didn't like it. I liked feeling the intense fear and anxiety of spring training and having to make the team. It was an exciting yet terrifying and unpleasant kind of thing. But the only year that I came back that I essentially knew I had a spot, it was strange. It was like there was something I didn't have to compete. And maybe that, like, when that continues to add up every year, like, you never have to compete for a spot, and it just starts to erode some of that. You know, it's like when you're sprinting and no one's chasing you, you just can't possibly run as fast when someone's chasing you. You know, it doesn't matter how well you motivate yourself. I just don't think you possibly can.
Yeah. Definitely. And I love that perspective, Dan, the player perspective, because I often look at the business angle. And I'm looking at the New York Yankees, the premier organization, certainly in my state of New York, obviously. And they've won 1 championship in the last 19 years. Yet, time and time again, they sign that big guy, Jacoby Ellsbury. Now, that contract is going to go down in history as a nightmare. And I think Jacoby Ellsbury is a hard worker. He put up that incredible year with the Red Sox before the Yankees signed him. Whether his body broke down or there were other factors.
You know what I heard about him, though? You want to hear a little anecdote? Someone said a while, I don't know, the timeline of this is irrelevant, but they basically said, hey, someone was talking to Jacoby Ellsbury. They said, hey, with your speed, if you learn to get better jumps, you could steal 50, 60 bases a year. Let's work on this together. And he's like, nah, I'm good. It's like, oh, okay.
Right. And
like, apparently that was the kind of guy he was. He was just like, nah, I'm good.
Right. And you wonder if that's a cue to why he's no longer playing, and that contract's been a disaster for the Yankees. But the Yankees don't learn. You know, they just inked Garrett Cole. Is that really going to equal a championship? And year in and year out, the Yankee fans around me are like, oh, they got the lineup this time. This is going to be our year. And I'm like, no. Power
good New York accent. I like that one. That was good.
Power hitters that come postseason strike out against frontline pitchers. It doesn't work. Giancarlo Stanton's going to strike out a lot in the postseason, and that's not going to equate to winning playoff games. But it seems like year in and year out, there is no learning. We got to get more 5-tool guys who play defense, who run the bases well, who make things happen without hitting the 3-run homer.
Did you guys see that ball Stanton hit against the Nationals the other day?
Woo!
It was like 120 exit velocity. It was like such a low and yet 40 rows deep home run. It was terrifying. Did you see it, Bobby?
I didn't see it, but I've seen
him. I haven't watched any baseball.
I can imagine the punishment he puts on the batting practice balls.
It was lower than a home run of that distance usually goes. It was just like clearly. He hit 120. He hit 121, so it speaks for itself. But
yeah.
The
last 6 guys to hit the ball 119 miles an hour or faster are all Judge and Stanton home runs. No one else in baseball since we've been tracking exit velo. And how many world championships have that brought the Yankees? Is he going to hit 120 mile an hour exit velo home run in the postseason? I would argue not that many.
Well, you don't get extra points for hitting it that far. You don't get extra points for hitting it 480.
Yeah.
You only get 1 point plus the men on the bases. Yeah. Maximum of 4 points, no matter how far you hit it.
You should get some more. You should get a few more runs for hitting the ball and it breaks breaks one of the chairs in the bleachers.
I really think with this stupid season that's probably going to collapse, I really think they should put like things in the outfield, like in the stands, that it's like you hit it, you get like a bonus. Like, let's make it fun. Let's make it like, like skee ball or something where there's just
that actually
things out
happened,
there.
Dan. At Citi Field, Michael Conforto and Jeff McNeil's cutouts were of their dogs in right field. And someone on the Braves, I'm forgetting who, hit Conforto's dog in right field. So maybe they should have.
That's awesome.
So maybe they should have given him some kind of donation to the Canine Society for doing that.
Mm-hmm. Bobby, you'll be pleased to know, and it's just a side note, I've got 17 Twitter notifications right now because I've been stirring the pot. Bobby.
So, all right. So Dan's real person, Darren, you spent some time with Dan. Yeah. Dan's Twitter has taken a sharp turn from like sarcastic Dan speak to like personable Twitter conversationalist, which is not like it sickens me.
Has it?
Yes, it has. And I read these tweets and I'm like, Dan didn't write that. Dan didn't write this tweet. And it's baseball conversations. It's usually posting like a clip or something like one podcast or article, something he wrote. I'm like, Dan didn't write that because it's not snarky enough. It needs.
I've never been a snarky tweeter. Not really. I've always been pretty.
She needs to pick up on your tone. My wife's in marketing, so I know this. Like you have to encompass the tone of the person you're tweeting as. So I'm gonna start responding to all your tweets as Dan or not Dan.
Well, what Bobby's referring to is I just have an assistant. She's just helping me with my social media, and really what she's just doing is posting articles, like the links to them, and just like, hey, in this video, there's bop, bop, bop. These 3 things. Check it out below. I write about half of them, and she writes about half of them. And you're not really going to know which because they're just like, they don't really have any personality in them. They're just like description of the piece of content that I've created. But Bobby does not like this. He wants me to be like, hey, screw you. Watch this video, idiot. That's what Bobby.
It's not even that. It's she like she definitely doesn't. She has a different tone than you would use in your tweets. And I can pick up on it right away.
Oh, there's been a couple of things she's put out there, yeah, that have been like poll kind of questions. Well, but the thing that's being stirred up now is the front squat stuff. So
I didn't see your front squat tweet or her front squat tweet.
Well, I have a video about whether front squats are good for pitchers or not, because from the rack position, this is a pretty oogie position for your elbows, right? This is like not great, and it's very difficult on your wrists and your finger flexibility. And so when you start talking about what's good for pitchers and what's not, you can do the front squat with straps like this, which is way easier because you're holding a strap to the bar, or you can do the cross arm grip. So there's 3 variations where you can do a front squat. And I think front squats are really excellent varieties of the squat that are safe for younger athletes. Like they're really tough and they build, I mean, they're my favorite version of the squat. And we did those all the time with all of our athletes, not all, because it's always like personal, like which, if it's appropriate for one kid or not. But anyway, my point was, this is a really tough on elbows, and pitchers really value their elbows. And if we can take some of this strain, which there's clearly strain, why would we not do this other variation or another variation that are just putting less stress on the elbows? And so I've been like continuing to stir the pot on Twitter about this. And some people are like, oh, they're safe if done properly. I'm like, just because you do something properly doesn't mean it's okay for a certain population. Like you're doing clean and jerk in the Olympics. Yeah, this is proper, but Olympic lifters aren't baseball pitchers. You know, like who's to say that extra bit of elbow stress isn't making their elbows a little bit more barky during the season? And they're like citing research studies that say Olympic lifting is safe for athletes. It's like, that's not the point. The point is, should you be adding more elbow stress during training to a pitcher who already stresses the crap out of his elbow by doing what he does for a living, which is throw baseballs? I think the answer is no. I don't think it makes a lot of sense.
Just a little
I don't know.
hot stir. That's Dan.
So I woke up to 20 notifications, and now there's a fresh new 20 now. So,
Bobby, could we say that the transformation and evolution of Dan's tweets is a sign of him just aging and maturing? I mean, for me,
we cannot.
You would know better than me, but for me, Dan was a great dichotomy when he was my roommate in the Dominican, and here's a guy hitting towering fungos that the players were just marveling at. You know, he's a pitcher by trade, yet he's hitting these mammoth fly balls that they were probably a little scared to get under.
My claim to fame,
Yet,
yes.
Yet we're back at the hotel having intellectual debates about, books that have been written. So I see this guy as someone who's a real interesting dichotomy. And I think what's happening.
Go me.
Yeah, go Dan. And I think what's happening on the Twitter thing is he's just kind of getting in touch with his more intellectual side maybe now.
Getting in touch with that.
I couldn't disagree more. I think Dan has thrown Brooklyn to the fire, and I'm gonna quote tweet her just out extensively now.
Yeah,
she does a good job. She really does a good job because she does put out a lot more content than you're used to seeing from Dan just on a daily basis, like a lot of links to tweet or links to articles, links to the podcast, not just this one. He's got other podcasts, softball podcasts. So she does a good job. It's just the tone. You can, like, if you know Dan, you're like, I don't know if Dan wrote. He wouldn't say that specifically. He'd say it, but he wouldn't say it like that.
I think she's surprisingly good at we've known each other a long time. I've known her since she was 14 maybe, and she's 22 now. So I think she does a pretty good job of shadowing my personality as a softball player.
She's close.
Doing all right.
She's like right on the cusp of like Dan speak, but she hasn't mastered.
I mean, it's not like, hey guys, do you love front squatting? Have a great day. Like it's not that. It's not that.
But that's how I read it.
That would be obvious.
In my head, that's how I read it.
Yeah, I gotcha. So Darren, do you think this bubble of free agency and like guaranteed contracts, like what do you predict for the future? Is it going to burst? Is it going to keep just going up? You make $50 million a year playing baseball?
I think it continues to go up so long as the American economy is going strong. I mean, the teams aren't going to make the same revenues with no fans in the seats and having cutouts of dogs. But the bottom line is it's not about winning. It's about profitability. So, the Yankees and the Angels haven't been winning championships with these gigantic free agent signings and these huge payrolls. But, boy, they're selling a lot of Mike Trout jerseys and Shohei Ohtani, different kinds of merchandise products. So whether the Yankees win or not, they're still going to be profitable. So I say, yes, the bubble continues to grow and it doesn't burst.
What about a year ago? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Bob.
I was going to say, I think it's different when you have a home, like a Mike Trout who came up through your system. You had him for those quote unquote free years, and then you pay him, as opposed to the Yankees, who it's every year. All right, who are the Yankees going to pluck from some other team? All right, and who are the Mets going to try and sign? I think it's a little bit different in that aspect, but yeah, I mean, the big money contracts haven't necessarily been paying off.
Well, last year there was just all these calls of collusion, right? Like they were waiting, like Dallas Keuchel didn't get signed until April. I mean, what was your take on all that? Was that a normal thing? I mean, was that a right or wrong thing to do for, I don't know if there was actual collusion. I mean, what was your take on last year's weird free agent period?
Yeah, so I found that really interesting. In the world of economics, there's this concept of game theory where corporations and firms tend to compete with each other and try to outduel each other without the other one knowing what they're doing. And it seemed like the opposite was occurring. They were cooperating. A guy by the name of John Nash talked about this concept of cooperating with each other. And it seemed like, because we never had free agents that were unsigned or holdouts like you have in the NFL so often. And you mentioned Keuchel, and I believe there were several relievers in that realm as well.
Kimbrel, I think, right? Yeah, I think it was Kimbrel. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if Papelbon was one, but it seemed like there were a few other players.
Mm-hmm.
But the point being, it was new territory for MLB baseball, and it certainly seemed like the owners were colluding. We don't know it for fact, but it was like they had enough. But the bottom line is those guys that we're talking about, Dan, are not the premier guys. They're not the Garrett Coles. They're not the Bryce Harpers. It's those lower rung end of level free agents that it was occurring with, kind of guys at the tail end of their career.
I mean, Kimbrel was a little bit fringe because he'd had a rougher season, but Keuchel wasn't. I mean, he was still one of the best starters available, right? I mean, but you're probably right on the whole. I mean, I think probably everyone else besides those two was probably what you said they were, like the $7 or $8 million guys, right? Not the $20 million guys.
Yeah, and we don't know what their agents were doing with the negotiations and if there was a little too much arrogance. I don't know who represented Keuchel, but certainly those backdoor negotiations can be part of that equation as well.
Maybe we should like start throwing like livestock into it. Like, all right, $7 million, 300 head of cattle, 1,000 chickens, and a family farm in Wyoming. Deal. We gotta start hedging our bets. If the world ends, if our current president gets elected again, livestock might be the new currency.
Gold.
Speaking of which, Bobby, we need your 1 minute take. Is your president going to get elected again?
I think so.
Oh, it's not a confident response from Robert.
I think he does. I don't know. I mean, who knows? There's literally 45% are going to vote one way, 45 or the other. There's like 10% of people that decide every election. I think he gets elected again. I think.
Well, here's my question. Here's my question for you. Does anyone who didn't vote for him the first time, and it was a very narrow victory, does anyone who didn't vote for him this time?
I think so.
Really?
I think so.
I think he loses votes. I don't think he gains any new votes, and I think that's why he loses probably. But
I don't know. I don't follow. Like I don't.
You don't follow Donald Trump,
no,
Darren. What's your take?
I don't follow like elections like that.
My take is it's all about the virus, and I'm not optimistic about the virus improving. I mean, maybe we get a vaccine that's more definitive by November when the election occurs, but I don't think the virus is going to die down between now and November. If anything, as the cold weather and flu season is upon us, things might get worse, sadly. So I think if the virus situation gets worse, it's going to be harder for him to be reelected. I think your question's an interesting one, Dan, and that is, are there going to be more people that vote for him or don't vote for him than last election? And I think there are a lot of people who are Donald Trump supporters that don't openly admit it. Whereas people on the other side of the aisle, I think they're more readily to admit and be outspoken about supporting their Democrat candidate. So Bobby might be right. There might be people who don't want to transition in president during this very volatile time in our country. And there are a lot of people who love Donald Trump's economics, just to come back to something I'm familiar with. He did a $2.3 trillion spending plan, which helped our economy. He did a tax cut that helped our economy. He's definitely trying to influence the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell's adding liquidity to the economy. And he's been a sage to the stock market. And a lot of people, and you guys were talking about stocks in a comical sense with the Dominican before, but the stock market's pretty much at record highs, especially the NASDAQ. And we have this horrible unemployment, a GDP shrinkage. So a lot of people vote with their pocketbook. So I think there are people, as Bobby mentioned, that may vote for him who didn't previously because of financial reasons.
I wonder how many people will vote, period, based on the two options that are presented. Like, you could not like Trump and also look at whether it's going to be Biden or somebody else and think, why even bother?
Well,
I think is a realistic consideration for a lot of people.
I think it was a very prevalent attitude before because Hillary was clearly awful. I think Biden is a lot less awful. So I think people before were like, I don't want to vote for Trump, but Hillary's the worst, so I'll just vote for him. Now it's like Biden seems like pretty
as many knocks against her as you had. She would be the first woman president. Like, she would have a group, like probably a pretty prevalent group of people that were pushing for her to be president just based on, gender equality, and she'd be breaking down a lot of barriers I
think she would have done fine. I didn't have any really negative. I just you just start to see the dishonesty of everyone in the government. That was my general feeling about her was just but Dan, I think she would have been a good president. I don't know.
Dan, let me ask you a question. Who do you think wins in a debate, Biden or Trump? Because their personalities are different. The way they speak is different. So I think that's going to be interesting.
I think
Trump,
about political
theory.
Without a doubt. I think without a doubt, it's Trump. I do think
Right.
Biden is like kind of slow to the punch for sure, and Donald Trump
Exactly.
is a very powerful persuader.
Can I
But,
rephrase that?
That's his biggest asset.
Can I rephrase that question? How entertaining would that debate be? Just from like
Look at this guy. He's half asleep. He's hey Joe, you need some warm milk, Joe? Let me get you one, Joe. As he drinks his water with two hands. Like
if he's one thing, like if he's one thing, he is funny. Like he says funny things. He'll tweet funny things. He'll tweet funny memes. Like that would be pure entertainment. Even if you don't like him, you're still gonna watch. Like it's entertaining. Like people watch his show all. It's like a show. It's a reality show. That's all it is, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, but that's what the thing is. People are tired of that. Like it's the thing is it's not a reality show. It's our country. So
are you gonna watch that
tired.
debate, Dan?
I don't have a TV, so probably not.
Ugh, that's right. I forgot.
I really enjoy being less plugged into all of the interwebs, so probably not. But maybe.
Bobby, let me ask you. Oh, you talked about Hillary. Do you think the Democrats are going to make sure there's more of a grassroots voting presence? A lot of people thought the Democrats became complacent in 2016 because Obama had won back-to-back terms, and they took for granted, and they just assumed Hillary was going to win, and they kind of slept on Donald Trump as a candidate. Do you think that'll be different this time around, and they'll really galvanize the masses to come out and vote?
I don't. I feel like enthusiasm around Biden. I don't think Biden is going to be the one on the ticket personally, but I don't think it. I feel like
that guy from V from Vendetta is he in the running?
It seems like somebody like the guy that hosts The Bachelor or something. At this point, I think it actually is going to be Kamala Harris or who's the woman he just beat in the primaries.
Oh, Rice.
No, Trump calls her Pocahontas.
Oh, Elizabeth Warren. Wait,
yes.
But Biden has the nomination, doesn't he?
He does, but I think they're going to ride out his, like, if you let him take all the, I mean, this is very political. I don't think I know. I'm not an expert. Yeah, if you let him ride out and take all the lumps from Trump all the way through like September, and then just take him off the ticket, like, oh, he's mentally, he can't handle it, and then you throw somebody else new in there, it's basically like a shot of adrenaline. Trump, not even Trump, just the Republicans in general don't have a chance to basically dig up as much on her as they might want to, attack her as much as they might want to. Like whoever it may be, will bring a little bit more energy, because Biden has essentially been in his basement, I feel like, for the last.
He has no energy. Yeah.
So I think that either if he does make it all the way to the ticket and maybe wins, I don't think he lasts more than a year in office. Like, I think I don't know what the amendment is where a president is incapable of performing the job, that you pull him off and give it to the vice president. But I feel like he's short in the tooth for whatever capacity he's going to be in politics.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's get back to baseball real quick. Although this was probably the most sane political clip that we've had. Bobby has changed a lot.
I'm bringing the heat here.
No, you brought no heat at all. You brought warm milk. You brought warm Biden oatmeal.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
Typically, there's at least a couple of theories. Bobby, are you going to take the coronavirus vaccine?
Absolutely not.
I knew it. Just go around sneezing and coughing on everyone.
I got yelled at. I didn't even bring this up. I got yelled at in a Starbucks yesterday because I had my mask like right here, because I was on the phone, but I was also like 20 feet. I was in the corner, like I stood away from everybody, and this guy yelled at me, and I yelled back because I'm like itching for confrontation at this point. So I'm like, of course I'm gonna yell back at this guy. I'm like, mind your own business. And then they're like, well, bring your drink outside. I'm like, fine, bring it outside to me. I don't care. And I walked outside. So I got reprimanded in a Starbucks.
Well, did you hear what they did in DC? Have we talked about this yet?
No.
You have to wear a mask at all times, indoor, outdoor, outside of your home.
What?
Which I just like, I agree with wearing masks. I wear them all indoors. I can do what I'm supposed to do. I don't complain about it. It's fine. It's not a big deal. But I just don't see the logic in the fact that restaurants are still open where you can sit down and just eat and be merry and whatever, laugh on each other. But if you're walking on the sidewalk by yourself, you have to have a mask on. Like, I just don't really understand the logic there.
The logic is business, Dan. The logic is we have to save our economy, so restaurants need to stay open. And
I get that. I support the restaurants staying open. I don't think they should close. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
It just seems like a strange double standard where you can sit, like I've seen some of these outdoor patios and they're packed with people now, which is fine, which again, I have no issue with that whatsoever. But then if you're like going to like say that I have to be masked up on the sidewalk outside around no one, I don't get how that logically makes sense.
Wait,
I just want there to be logical consistency.
What's
like
the
I could be fined up to $1,000, which I'm sure will never happen, but I could be fined for not wearing a mask walking down the street.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to move.
But you could sit on an outdoor patio and have 5 beers with your friends, 6 feet from the next table.
That's it. 5 beers.
Be fine. Huh? I mean,
Only
yeah,
5.
you could have 15 beers, whatever you want. I just feel like that's a strange overreaction where she's like, well, numbers are climbing a little bit. And I think our mayor's done a really good job, but numbers are climbing a bit. So you have to wear a mask at all times now. It's like, is that really the reason that they're climbing? People like passing each other on the sidewalks, like out in the park and outdoors. Like I breathe out of my nose. And a lot of the research on mask use, which I think is interesting, they talk about how important masks can be at stomping down a cough, but they're talking about an explosive. So there's this one study that I read was about, an explosive cough. So without a mask, it'll shoot particles up to 10 feet away. With a mask on, only like 2 feet away, which is a great reduction. But what if you're just walking around breathing out of your nose? My air is going down. I mean, what is the radius it's extending? And I'm not coughing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't that's why I don't really understand. And again, I'm not going to complain about it. It's not a big deal. I just that doesn't make logical sense to me. Like,
is DC
I'll follow the rules. I'm not sure. I don't know. So I put it on. I mean, when I'm there's times outside when I don't, but when I get to closer where there's a lot of people around, I'll put it on. Like, it's fine. It's not a big deal. But at the same time, it just doesn't.
I have a
doesn't make a lot of logical sense. Okay.
How many people do you see out that are just not wearing them, or is everybody just got
the vast majority wear masks outside?
Really?
Even when they're jogging by themselves, which again, it's that doesn't make sense. That if it was that contagious, we'd all have it by now. Which if that's your prerogative, that's fine. But I just I want there to be logic.
What constitutes
anything
a mask?
Covering your face?
Could it be porous crocheted mask?
I mean, well, that's the thing. That's the thing, Bobby.
Cut them out.
It's not like, hey, you need to have an N95 mask, or you need to have the masks that I have. This thing is like a piece of tissue paper, and I don't even wear it. And I'm not sure. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but if there's no, seatbelts have mandated, you need to be able to sustain a certain amount of whatever pressure, impact to be safe. There is no safe mask. Can I wear something to cover my face and then cut a hole for my mouth? That's a mask?
Obviously no, idiot.
But that's a mask. But you see my point though?
Well, there was also a thing.
Good one, yeah.
Who's going to argue with you if you're wearing something that's covering your face, but it's got holes in it, because it's crocheted? I mean, it's poking fun, but
yeah, there's been no mandates on this. A lot of the Gators. I'm coaching my son's 12-year-old team, and we have to have masks. But these little thin gaiters that people wear around their neck and then briefly pull above their nose, that's not going to work as well as an N95. And then everything in between. So the mandates and even the punishments for not having a gun, there's so much variability and hands-off approach that it's so hard to say it's going to help society unless they're actually going to mandate what mask works, and there's going to be real punishments for people who don't wear them. And some of that is the production, the supply side. We don't have enough N95s. We just don't have enough effective masks. We have a lot of those paper dust masks that probably don't work that well.
Yeah. Well, I think the overall thing is,
there's no specifications. Like, hey, your mask needs to be 4x6, like a index card, and it's got to be 2 millimeters thick and whatever. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what mask.
Well, they could never possibly check everyone. Like, they're not going to stop people on the street and like, sir, is your mask 1 millimeter or is it 2 millimeters?
Sir, why is your mask have a big cut?
But I did see an article about a lot of people who are wearing like these respirator masks that you would wear like doing sanding or painting, and they have a one-way valve. So when you breathe out, the valve opens up so you can push that air out, and then the valve closes so it filters air coming in. They're like, that's not the one you want to wear because now you're breathing out your bad air out through that valve. That's the opposite of what we want to have happen. We want the air filtered both ways. So I saw that article, which was reasonable, because a lot of people have those one-way valves, because that makes sense if you're doing painting in your home or you're sanding or something. Those are respirators, right? But I mean, the study that I read, which was interesting, is just like, look, even a cloth mask does a really good job of stopping these bigger particles that are, these liquid particles that you're going to spit out when you're laughing or talking or sneezing or coughing, which is definitely a good thing. Like, I get that. That's completely fine. There's so much, I don't know.
Feels insane to wear it outdoors with
with distance from people.
Even like just in general, like I'm almost at the point where like this would need to be like people kill. Like if you got it, you need to be like in like shock, like epileptic shock for it to justify.
What are you saying?
I'm saying like if you're walking down the street and you come across somebody that has it, like it needs to like affect you instantly and like noticeably to justify wearing a mask outside in public. Like,
I mean, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I'm just saying it doesn't, there's so much in open air. They're just, I don't know. Got a nice shot of Darren's leg, but
I got to show a little flesh, Dan.
Indoors, like did you see the Delta flight turned around because 2 passengers refused to wear their masks?
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I never heard about that.
It happened just yesterday, I think, which is fair. Like, look, if you know the rules, and that's the thing. Like here in DC, indoors, it's been a rule for a long time. You have to wear masks to go into a store. So it's just like, don't complain about it. It's fine. Just put it on. Go about your business. And it's the same thing with these flights. Like you have to wear a mask on Delta. And then 2 passengers after they took off were like, no. And they're like, all right, we're going back, which is crazy. But I think that's reasonable. Like at the end of the day, like we've had no shirt, no shoes, no service for forever, right? If that's the rules, just you got to put a shirt on before you go in a store. Like they have those in all the beach towns. Some places you can go without a shirt, some places you can't. And you just got to abide their rules. That's fair, right?
It's fair for indoor. You're using their service, but like walking outside, is that somebody's service? Like, you're just
and again, like I think if you're maintaining your distance, if you're not sick, if you're not coughing and sneezing, I think you should be fine outdoors without a mask. So that's where I like kind of get off it a little bit. But
infringing on my right to run shirtless and maskless through the city.
Well, at the end of the day, I still don't understand like the intense anger about it. Like I'm not angry about it. I think it's a little silly. Like I think it's a little necessary, the outdoor thing that's just happened here, but it's not a big deal. It's just really not. But people are like raging. Why are they raging?
Because when they take a little bit of your freedom away at a time, like you don't get that back. You don't get your freedoms back. Like,
what does that mean? You don't get your freedoms back?
You don't get your freedoms back. Like you used to go, like go to the airport and checking in for the airport is drastically improved. Like not improved. It's become much, much stricter after 9/11, rightfully so, right? But it's not like, oh, if it's going to go back. Like nothing's ever gone back to the way it used to be. Like the more they take, the more it's permanently taken away from you. So if you're going to have to wear masks, like at no point, I don't see in the foreseeable future, like at what point is the mayor of DC going to be like, okay, you don't have to wear masks anymore?
At some point, right, it will happen.
Right is being taken away from you. And people see that as like, oh, well, like gun rights. People argue gun rights all the time.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, when they make them more strict and more strict, at some point, like you're not getting lesser restrictions on, gun, like being able to own a gun. You're only getting more to the point where they're going to make it impossible for you to get a gun. That's at least where I think people are coming from. Like you're taking more and more of my rights away, and I'm not going to get those rights back. And it's over the course of U.S. history, I feel like when they take rights away, they're not giving them back willingly. Like the more government has control, the more they can make you do what they want you to do.
Let me ask you guys this. Is it a rights thing? People feel their rights are being infringed on, or is it a discipline thing? For instance, I was at a driving range hitting golf balls, and I would say 4 of us had masks on and about 40 people didn't. And we're about 5 to 7 feet away. I don't know the number in these golf stalls. And I heard some people saying, oh, I can't really hit the golf ball with my mask on. Oh, it's so annoying in the heat. So is it a discipline thing, or is it more of a, my rights are being infringed upon as an American, and this is what our country was built on, my liberty?
By discipline, what do you mean?
Well, what I mean is we have the highest per capita rate right now among developed countries of the coronavirus. If you look at the rate of infection per capita, per person, the U.S. leads the world, the developed world in it. So my question is, why is that? Is it because what Bobby's saying, people feel their rights are being infringed on, or they just don't have the darn discipline to keep
put
the
it on
mask
when they need to? Yeah, I'd say it's the latter. I'd say it's the latter.
Period.
I think it's I obviously think it's the former. I think it's people feel like their rights are being infringed by. I think everybody's got the discipline to wear a mask, and kind of what I was trying to get across before. If people were seeing like 60, 70 million people hospitalized because of this, I don't think there'd be any question that 100% of people would be wearing a mask and probably staying locked down in their house for as long as possibly needed. But when you're talking about like 99.8 some percent of people are fine from it, like no issues, after the fact, whatever the number is, over 99%. And then now they're like Illinois just went like, well, you can't travel to Wisconsin and come back without quarantining yourself for 14 days. You can't travel to Indiana, Iowa. So if you leave Illinois essentially and you try and come back to your home, you have to stay quarantined in your house for 14 days. And that's that's an infringement. So now I'm basically locked in my house. I'm locked in my state. I have no freedom to travel, even though we're in a free country. I feel like the outlook of it is, this isn't as serious to take away my right to do certain things, to walk outside without a mask, to be able to travel to different, drive to a different state, go see family. Like I can't hold a service if a relative passes away. I can't have people come watch or come pay their respects to, let's say, a parent, but I can riot and protest in the street at all hours of the night with thousands of people. Like I feel like people's sensibilities are being juggled, and people are getting angry. I just think people are getting angry that they're being told to do certain things, but a certain section of the population is not being held to those same standards. Whatever. I mean, I just think it's more freedom based, and it's been like this for over 5 months now. I think it's run its course as far as patience is concerned.
I would say that we're whinier than probably any other country, though. We're more spoiled and whiny, and I think undisciplined than any other country, probably. Oh, I can't do this for a month or two. I mean, that is America, is it not? Is there any country, Bobby, is there any country that you can think is more whiny than America and entitled?
Maybe Canada.
There's no way. No way. No way. Canada,
England,
way more disciplined, tougher people.
England?
Probably not. They've been around.
You have to bash one of those two countries.
I just think we're the whiniest country by a huge margin in the whole world. Darren,
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to argue with that, especially as someone who teaches school systems and gets a lot of parent conferences and emails.
Yeah.
It's an interesting too, because you see like Italy is basically wide open again, and Italy was just, all you heard about it in the beginning was Italy's just totally ravaged.
Yeah.
And China is essentially open for the most part, and it started in China. So it's like, why is the U.S. different? Like, I think people are just waking up and are asking questions they wouldn't normally ask of your government leaders, like your local government leaders. Why are we different? Like, we're the richest country and the most medically advanced country to some aspect. Like, why are we locked down and everybody else is essentially open and some places never closed? I think people just asking questions, which I'm totally for. That's like my thing anyways. Maybe it's not.
That's your thing when you just want to stir the pot. You're like, hey, Darren, is there an alien in your house right now? Maybe there is. Maybe there is.
Maybe, like, Darren's like, absolutely not. There's not an alien. Maybe there is. Check the fridge.
My 4-year-old dog behaves like an alien, so I will say yes, there is an alien here.
See, well, maybe he's an alien.
Gotcha. So Darren, what are your predictions for this season? Do you think? I mean, the Marlins thing is a very big nail in this coffin. What are your predictions?
I wish I could be more optimistic, but we're within the first few days of the season, and the Marlins already had that outbreak or that pocket of virus, and it shut down the Yankee-Philly game because the Marlins played the Phillies, and it leads to that whole snowball spiral effect, and I could see that continuing. So it's hard for me to believe that we'll get through even 50% of the 60-game season.
Yeah. Bobby, what's your take?
I think unless somebody gets seriously hospitalized or potentially dies, I think it's going. I think there's a World Series and everything.
Wow.
That's such a profoundly bad take. There's like no shot. That's the real. That's what happens.
Happening. That's an option though. It's on the list of options, and that's the option.
Maybe it does. Maybe it does.
Maybe they play the whole. I honestly do think they play the whole season. They knew this was risky, and whether they got to postpone games, play double headers, there's no way that they sign that paper saying we're going to pay you guys to play and not play. Like I said, it's going to have to be something drastic. Just because these guys have to be quarantined for 2 weeks, that's not drastic. Most of them are healthy, mid-20s adults. Like, they're going to be fine. And if somebody gets hospitalized and it takes on like a real form, or if the players just decide we're not going to play, then I think it goes through 100%. I don't think there's any way they stop the season and stop making money.
I mean, you don't have to be in good shape to be a manager or to be a coach or to be an athletic trainer. So one of these guys with a beer belly gets sick, and
that's what I'm saying. If one of them gets seriously ill,
higher at risk or whatever.
Yeah. If one of them gets seriously ill, I think
it's not just the players; it's all the peripheral people that make the. I mean, there's so many people that play a supporting role.
Right, but I think that's the only way. Like, just because the Marlins had a dozen people have it and they got to be quarantined.
Just a dozen.
Well,
it's like 10%. It's like 10%.
They're not stopping. Like, they're not stopping for that. We'll play doubleheaders.
I think just a couple players that speak out on Twitter against it, and it's a wrap. A couple players are like, we got to stop doing this. But like if Sean Doolittle used his platform some more and's like, I'm out.
But there's so many guys. There's just guys that will take his place. And that's the problem with being the player. Like, the players are temporary. Like, the ownership is essentially permanent. Like, if that season's going to go, all of the players, like, it's got to be a collective walkout. I don't think I don't think they're going to say no to the money. I think you have to play. They're going to play at this point.
Darren, what do you think? There's a point when the product degrades too, right?
Yeah, probably. But you still watch it. I mean, we were watching cornhole tournaments and darts on ESPN.
I wasn't.
You don't have a TV, Dan.
No, I wouldn't watch cornhole. I'd rather. There's so many things I'd rather do.
You would if you could gamble on it.
Darren, what's your take?
Yeah, the business of it's interesting. You follow companies like Penn Gaming and DraftKings. Those companies are thriving off of the gambling that's occurring on these sports, including baseball. And then you've got the notion that it might get shut down, and those stocks, you were talking about stocks before, they immediately take a pullback. What I'd like to pose is, what's going to happen to our three cities? Dan, you've got the Washington Nationals trying to repeat. Bobby, you've got a White Sox and Cubs team that are trying to get back to the big dance. And I've got the Yankees, who are the 5-2 favorites or 7-2 favorites to win the World Series, along with the LA Dodgers. So I want to hear from you, Bobby, since you think the season's going to go through the World Series. Who's going to win it all, Bobby? Is it your Chicago Cubs or is it my Yankees?
It's going to be my Chicago White Sox. I don't think I can't believe they're not the favorite already, but I think it's The season's going to happen. I know who it's not going to be. It's not going to be the Marlins because half their team can't play currently. I do like the Yankees. I think the Yankees have a shot. I think the Nationals have a shot. I think anybody with two solid starting pitchers and the decent lineup. Like, I like the Twins lineup. I mean, the Twins just mash. But if I got to pick one team from each league, I'm going with the White Sox. And I do like the Nationals. I really like the Nationals.
The White Sox are thriving because they've been playing in front of no fans for like a decade.
Yeah,
so they've been ready for this. This is their moment. This is their moment.
Let's wrap this up. Now we're just getting below the belt jokes.
The Orioles and the Orioles and the Marlins and the White Sox were the front runners.
If in a perfect world, the World Series this year would be either Mets Yankees or Cubs White Sox, because that would be a thing. I think that, because it's not. Has it happened? It happened with the Yankees and Mets, correct? In 2000.
2000.
I think a Cubs White Sox World Series. I think something to that magnitude would be the best situation for the Major League Baseball. So I'm going to predict White Sox Cubs.
Okay.
With the White Sox winning in a sweep.
I'm going Yankees Dodgers, which I think would be a fascinating World Series as well. And that Dodger lineup 1 through 9 with their pitching staff, to me, is the best in baseball.
That's an unfair lineup and depth. I mean, they could probably field 2 starting 9s that would make the playoffs.
Yeah. Yep. They got 3-4 possible MVP candidates in that lineup.
It's crazy.
Mookie Betts, 10 years. Darren, how do you feel about that contract?
Right now, you love Mookie Betts. You look what he's done. Seems like
He's
a quality character
guy.
He's
really good at baseball. He's very good at baseball.
Yeah, I've heard that. But I would bet 7 years from now, that contract gets the negative vote.
Well, and is that how they're thinking about this? They're like, hey, he's worth $50 million a year for 5 years. So, or whatever. I know you got $350 for 10 years. Is that right? So you can say, hey, he's worth $70 million for 5 years, and then the rest of that's just like whatever.
I think the Dodgers are super thirsty. They've been close. They're knocking on the door. They haven't gotten there, and now we've got our leadoff hitter, and this is going to put us over the top as their mentality. So that's why they did it. We're finally going to get the cherished ring because we got our, MVP / leadoff styled player.
Yeah, Mookie Betts is pretty good. I was surprised at that contract, but he's a good player.
So was Jacoby Ellsbury. So was Jacoby 4 years ago.
Well, who was better going into their contract?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to argue against Jacoby. I mean, we forget about it, but he was stealing 30-plus bases a year and hitting for power and playing a phenomenal center field. So I'd have to say that's a toss-up.
Which is, that's saying something, because I'm looking at Mookie Betts' stats right now for 2015 to 2019. I mean, they're pretty good. Like, he's got some solid numbers. His MVP year was crazy. But Jacoby Ellsbury, I mean, speed, power, like playing center field. I mean, he was the guy in Boston. Like, Pedroia was like the heart of that team, but Ellsbury was the production. We lost Darren.
He just comes in and out. He's like an outdoor cat. Just
comes and goes as he pleases.
Comes and goes as he pleases. It's classic Coach Gurney. So Bob, what do you have on tap this coming week for your teams?
Got a lot of tryouts. It's tryouts. It's crazy.
Is it tryout season already? Wow.
It's insane. This is honestly, some teams did tryouts the week after the 4th of July.
They keep pushing it up. I hate that.
It's terrible because we're going so late this year, and there's going to be overlap of guys that go other places that are still playing, and I'm doing tryouts without even getting out a chance to go watch some of these kids play, live games and get an idea of how they perform in games. Like it's ridiculous.
What's your everyone essentially they try to get their tryouts in first, and then they force kids to give them an answer before they can go to another tryout. Is that sort of the way it works in Chicago as well?
Yeah, exactly the way it works. I try and give everyone at least a week to make a decision, and it's not because it's hey, you commit to us or get the hell out of here. It's look, if you're not going to commit to us, it's fine. I just need to know because there's other kids or I need to hold another tryout, or I just don't want to get stuck with a situation with like 7 players for an age group, and you normally need 12, and now we're searching for 5 kids, which is very difficult to do. And then you have to go back to those 7 and say, hey, I'm sorry, I can't field the team for you guys. That's the worst situation. So
yeah,
you have
tough.
it's a tough situation, but we're doing them. We're hardcore tryouts, no masks at tryouts. Also, no touching coaches.
How do you not do masks? I feel like you have to do masks.
No masks. We take their temperature before they come in.
Is that just because you're you, or what?
I mean, there's no mask mandate like for youth sports.
Okay.
I don't come anywhere near the players. The other 2 coaches that are there don't come anywhere near the players. We kind of just direct from 20 feet away or whatever, and take their temperature before they come in. Waivers. No parents allowed. Groups, the group's got to be under 50 now. That's the phase I think we're in, under 50 players. So we're just try and get them in and out. I try not to have them there long, hour, 40 minutes, 2 hours max. I mean, once they finish, I'm trying to like, hey, good luck. Well, thanks for coming. Here's the info. We'll see you later.
Yeah. Yeah, the tryout situation is tough because, I mean, what do you advise your parents to do? Do you say, hey, try to hit a couple tryouts, try to hit, like, what would you advise a parent who like wants to try out for you and maybe wants to try out for 2 other teams?
I tell them to just go. I'm like, hey, go try out. If I always say at our tryout, I'm like, or to our teams, you might not play. You might play for us next year. You might not. I'm like, this is what you need to know. If you go to another team, they're going to expect you to do these things. Like they're expecting you to show up to the tryout with your shirt tucked in and properly equipped. They're going to expect you to know how to throw the ball around the infield. I said, it's not exclusive to our program. There's plenty of programs. I actually offer, especially for the high school guys, because that's a big one, like 15U to 16U kids decide what team they want to try and push them to college essentially. And I tell you, look, I'll tell you everything I know about the other programs. I'm friendly with most of the guys in the area. I'll give you the best, the best advice I can. But I'm like, if you're worried about getting, like, what are your issues for leaving? Is it playing time? Well, is it the team you're on? If you're on the B team, essentially, like, are you going to go there and be on the A team? Is there A team playing the same tournaments that our B team plays in? You don't just leave because you want to leave and you think you're better than, player B that's playing over you. Like, weigh what's going to get me to the next level. And I'm open with it because players come and go all the time. It's not personal. Like, I don't take it personal. I know you didn't take it personal if guys wanted to leave.
Yeah, I feel it should be clear that, look, you don't owe us any, it's a 1-year contract essentially.
Right.
Do your job, we'll do ours. You don't owe us anything. You don't, we don't owe you anything. Just, I think loyalty is always good, but people should do what they need to do. What's best for them. So as we wrap up here, Coach Gurney, what advice would you have for parents out there? You've worked with a lot of kids over the years. What advice would you give parents, whether it's, I don't know, anything? What's your little podium here to your hill to die on as far as things that are good for young ball players?
Yeah, it sounds pretty simple, but I would keep it fun. It's so important that baseball and sports and activities, let's not lose concept that it has to be fun. It can't be all about, I want to build his or her profile so that they get into a good college and possibly get a scholarship. It can't be all about productivity and in building your resume. It has to be about fun. And it also can't be about the parent trying to relive his or her dreams through their child. So those would be the 2 things I would say. And make sure it's healthy. That's all. Is it a healthy activity for them physically and emotionally? So those would be my little takes on that, Dan.
What do you think are some of the emotional pitfalls that parents should say, okay, what does that mean? What are some emotional pitfalls they should avoid? Is this like comparison on social media? Is this like what is it? Too much pressure?
Well, I think social media is going to occur regardless of the kid playing sports. And there's unfortunately a lot of that social media bullying, cyberbullying that occurs. But what I mean is the parent putting a lot of undue pressure on the kid because they've invested $3,000-4,000 in this travel team and $100 for a hitting or a pitching lesson over the years. So they're invested time-wise and monetarily wise. So then they put a lot of pressure on the kid to perform, and that leads to a lot of angst and stress for the player or the kid.
Yeah, that's fair. Bobby, you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Getting pot committed, kind of, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than just getting a scholarship or, trying to make it to the big leagues. I mean, it's hopefully you're with either an individual or a team or a bunch of coaches that are trying to, bring more value than just my son might make it to Division I. And that's, if a good organization will do that, and you should try and seek out those guys. But I agree, you can't throw all your eggs into one basket and hope like full ride or bust. And it feels like you're walking your kid into failure, essentially, because nobody gets full ride, especially in baseball.
Yeah. So Darren, appreciate you coming on the show today. It was a really fun conversation, and definitely, with you pitching us sort of the economics talk, ended up going a lot of cool directions today. I think it was really unique for the shows that we've had. It wasn't too much on the coaching side, but a nice different perspective on baseball. So we appreciate you. Where can people find you on the web? Where would you like to direct them to?
So my Twitter handle is Coach Gurney, and that's also my email, coachgurney@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to continue the discussion with any of your listeners. Feel free to hit me up on either of those two mediums. And this has been a lot of fun for me, Dan, reconnecting with you since our trip to the DR.
Yeah,
and
good times.
Bobby, really enjoyed your perspective as well. Definitely different than most people's perspectives, in my area here. But there's definitely a lot of people like you out there. I probably just don't hear from them.
Bobby and I have a healthy debate. We're very polarized,
for sure,
opposite ends of the spectrum. So if you're going to follow Coach Gurney, it's Gurney. So at Coach Gurney, Gurney on social media, or coachgurney@gmail.com, right? Did I get that?
Yeah, perfect. That's exactly right. And hopefully you and I will be doing some international coaching once all these travel restrictions and the virus gets under control. Love to do a trip to Japan with you, or possibly Cuba in the coming years.
Yeah, tell Pete, our travel broker, put us together. I want to go to Japan quite badly. But yeah, if you're a parent out there, as a last note, these international trips are definitely expensive. But I know that the kids that went with us really had a profound experience as far as they wanted to essentially give every piece of equipment that they had away to these kids, just helping them and just seeing just how respectful and humble and hardworking the players were with nothing. It was really a worthwhile experience, even though it was expensive because, flights to a foreign country, hotels, all this stuff, not a cheap trip, even compared to the expense of traditional American travel baseball fees. But the kids were just so, I think, moved by the experience, just seeing how, like I said, the way they live and yet still how hard they play and what good people they are. And it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and our players, Dan, really got a sense of what it was like to be on a college or a minor league baseball team with long bus rides and basically 18 hours a day of baseball talk.
It's a lot of baseball. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a good experience. So thank you out there for listening. We appreciate you being here on the Morning Brushback. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen. Obviously, we're here every Tuesday and Friday at 9 Eastern on Twitter and YouTube. So thanks again for being here. We will see you next week or on Friday on the Morning Brushback.
See you.